Welcome to Page to Screen, the podcast where Nikki and Christina discuss books that were turned into movies and films that were adapted from books. As always, we do remind you that spoilers lay ahead. Now, we invite you to decide with us the age-old question, which is better, the book or the movie?
Podcast right ahead! Hey everybody, welcome back to Page to Screen.
Hey, Nikki,
Yeah.
do you trust me?
Hey Christina, you jump,
Yeah.
I jump. Yeah, so everyone, once again, we're back. Christina's back. How you feeling today, Christina?
I am ready to sink my teeth into this one.
I thought you were going to say you feel like the king of the world.
Well, if people don't know what we are here to talk about from that, I don't know how else to explain it.
Well, it's funny because technically, we're not really doing that one. If we want to get technical about it,
Which we will get very technical. So we are discussing the 1955 nonfiction book, A Night to Remember, written by Walter Lord, which details the sinking of the Titanic on April 15th, 1912. And obviously, the sinking of Titanic, where hundreds and hundreds of people lost their lives, is the reason why we're so jovial today.
Oh, yeah. That's why we're feeling it. Just awful. Just awful. Now I feel real bad for laughing so much, so thanks.
Don't feel bad. I think just to get right into it, the thing about Titanic is that it's just this horrible thing, this awful thing that happened that so many people are just obsessed about. And this is interesting because the book is not fictional. It's straight from the survivors and from different types of evidence that he was able to comb through to put it together. And then it was made into the movie just a few years later in 1958. And it was, as we will discuss, quite a big source of material for James Cameron's Titanic, which is what everybody knows.
Apparently it was a very big. Cool beans, Jimmy Cameron. We see you. Yeah, I fully agree with like the New York Times when it came out. Actually, a lot of reviewers have said it's the most definitive resource about the Titanic, and it is insane.
It is.
Everyone knows about the Titanic, and if you don't, what? It happened.
Don't be so ignorant.
Yeah, Google. Just being able to read actual things that people said to each other on the ship, it's so depressing.
It is.
I know that there's probably a lot of people out there who think that the James Cameron movie version of Titanic is the most definitive and correct version of events. But let me tell you, when I was reading this book, I was livid. I have never been so mad in my entire life at a ship. Okay? And you know what ship I'm talking about.
Oh, are you talking about one Miss Californian?
I never want to go to California. That's how mad I am at the ship that's called it. Like, if you're only basing your information off of Titanic, off of movies and TV shows and stuff like that, definitely pick up this book and read it, because I want you to feel the white hot rage that I feel. This ship is basically, they had so many opportunities to not sink.
Right. While the Titanic was sinking, there was another ship called the Californian that was within eyesight. They could see one
It
another.
was not even
While
10 miles away.
Right, and they saw the whole thing happen and they did nothing. It's the the whole story of the Titanic is just so many different examples of the failure of humanity
Yeah.
and the failure of people to empathize and to worry about their fellow, humans. It's so depressing. And then you get like little tiny glimpses of people who are trying. I mean, just talking about Captain Smith and all of the crew,
Yeah.
that, which, by the way, I kept forgetting the word crew. So as I was talking to my husband Carlos, I'm like, what's it called? The guys on the ship, the crew. Thank you, the crew. So all of the crewmen who were able to keep a sound mind during the sinking and get people onto the boats, and it's like you've got that juxtaposed against the Californian, where they just sat there and did nothing.
Some of the stuff, like, so the book is entirely just from hitting the iceberg to, the being in the lifeboats. There's no real story about, like, building the ship and all that other stuff. It's really just like the brass tacks and the real, like, facts about that night. And
I was surprised. I mean, it starts right with the lookout guy.
it jumps right in. It's as if I've been
Right?
on the boat for a few hours already. It was just like, ugh, whatever, iceberg. I wasn't expecting it because honestly, this is the first time I've read the book. This book has been in my house since I was a small child, and I can remember opening the book as a kid because at the back of the book it has a list of all of the people who are on the ship. And was it the ones who are italicized or the ones who survived?
Yeah.
And it is, I can remember looking at that and being like, I don't want to read this.
Right.
I'm good. I'll wait. I'm glad I did wait. I don't think younger me would have been interested in the story because it is very factual. It's very fact heavy and it is sad facts. Like, there's no fun facts like, hey, there were 8,000 balloons on Titanic. Like, there's no like, hey, did you know that you could fill the ballroom up with like 10,000 bouncy balls and still have room for an elephant? No, there's no fun facts like that.
I liked, though, that there was a certain amount of restraint because you can tell that Walter Lord, who wrote it, was just immersed. Immersed.
Oh, there's going to be more of that.
He was just completely immersed in Titanic and Titanic facts, but he keeps it quite tight. Like
Yeah.
the one that I can think of is the book The Devil in the White City, which is about the World's Fair and also the serial killer H.H. Holmes. And as much as I find both of those subjects to be extremely interesting, the guy loses himself in the details. It's like, you don't have to tell me how many planks of wood were assembled for this one section. Like, I don't need to hear about it. And this seems to be a little bit more just keeping it together and focused.
Yeah. I appreciated that, especially because of the survivors who were interviewed for this book, I think a majority of them were actually the third class passengers. Those are the stories where at the time, at the time that this book was published, people really didn't focus on, who else was on the ship. It was like, oh, the Astors were on the ship and the Strausses were on the ship. And, Captain Smith, oh my goodness. No one really cared about everybody else. And it was everybody else who really had the hardest time. And it's so, I can't even imagine what it must have been like for Walter to be sitting with these people, because he was also, much like James Cameron later in life, he was very obsessed with these like ship sinkings and stuff, and he got very into Titanic, and he was a big collector. You can actually see his collection at the Maritime Museum in the UK. They have his entire collection, all of his manuscripts. He was like the world's biggest collector. You know what he has?
What?
He has the pig. the woman, there's a woman who was on the boat, and it is kind of depicted in James Cameron's Titanic, but not the same way. There's a woman who has this, like, she calls it her lucky pig, and when you wind it up, it plays music. And she made her maid go back to get her lucky pig or whatever, and she brings it with her off the boat. But she had it in her will that he was supposed to get her lucky pig. Which...
Such a strange, like...
It's insane, right? But for someone that obsessed with Titanic...
MacGuffin to, like, go through this extremely, like, harrowing incident. And, you know... The third-class passengers, who cares about them but the pig ate it?
I know. You couldn't even fit an extra third-class lady in that boat, but you went back and got your pig? Cool. Wink, wink. Enjoy that pig. Have fun with it. But I thought that was something that I found to be so interesting, was that it's not... A lot of people, I feel like, who look at Titanic and study Titanic see it from there's like two different ways of thought with Titanic, and there's like the scientific way, you know, where you're trying to analyze how could Jack and Rose both fit on the board, or how did the ship actually crack in half? We'll get to that later.
Don't get me started.
Trust, we'll get to it, you guys. But then there's the other people who are just obsessed with the history of it. And I think that Walter was able to really balance out both and was very compassionate about the entire situation. He didn't tell this story from a class perspective. He told it from a survivor perspective.
Speaking of the class thing, you know, this is well known to be an example of how people who are wealthy are treated completely differently than individuals who are not.
Yeah.
I don't think it really hit me before, and where we find ourselves now with COVID and anti-maskers, there were anti-stinkers, and it's not just because they were trying to keep crowds from panicking. They were trying to get people to safety as quickly as possible without starting, you know, a mass panic. I understand that. I get that. But even as the situation was clearly serious, they can see that the thing is sinking. There are still people who don't want to wear a life jacket because it's not fashionable, and because they find it to be annoying, and they don't want to wear it, and they think it's stupid. Are you kidding me?
Listen, I'll wear anything that'll save my life. I don't care how ugly it is. Listen, I would voluntarily wear camo in the woods. Come on, it's fine.
That could, you know, that could go pretty poorly, actually.
Yes, it could. Scratch that. I just want to wear a life vest. I'm good. That was something I found so interesting too, is that a lot of the stories that we get from the Titanic, I know that I knew facts and figures about the boat sinking and all of that, but this book really, really brought out the fact of how many men actually survived, because any other time you look at the Titanic in some sort of entertainment form, they always make it out like all the men were very generous and let, you know, deaf women and children first, y'all. It's totes fine. We're sinking. And in your mind's eye, you're like, okay, all these poor men went down to sea. No, there was a whole side of the ship where women were just like, I'm not getting in that boat. And their husbands are like, if I go with her, is that okay? And the guy was, go right ahead. You do you.
My favorite was and I told Carlos that this would have been him on the Titanic because he's quite savvy. So the one guy who got his wife onto the boat, he grabs like all of their, you know, jewelry or whatever, and then he actually jumps into the water.
Yeah.
And then obviously they're not going to just go like, oh, bye. So they let him into the boat because he jumped into the water, and I thought, man, that's a smart motherfucker.
You know, it's funny. I would have been the pastry chef.
The pastry chef. He is my favorite. I remember reading about the pastry chef a few years ago. There was this article. I don't remember who did it. Maybe The Atlantic did it. No, I don't know. But
Oh, I told you there'd be more. I told you.
there there was this one article I remember reading, and it was about the pastry chef because I specifically remember them talking about like his feet were the only things damaged. Like he was perfectly fine
Yeah.
floating in the water, but I didn't know the greater detail of how he. Okay, guys, there's this really cool pastry chef
Yeah.
who
He's
he
the best.
almost
He's
yeah,
literally my
he's the best.
favorite. And I'm so glad that Walter has him in this book and was able to talk to him because I was
Yes.
rooting for him.
I was rooting for him, and I was so excited every single time he showed up. As soon as the ship hits the iceberg, this guy starts acting. So he grabs a bunch of bread, he's throwing it into the lifeboats so that people will have something later. He's getting drunk, like shit faced the entire time. He's doing nothing but drinking. Then he's like tossing stuff into the water for flotation devices. He's walking all around. And then he does the Jack and Rose thing at the end where he's like standing at the back of the ship as it's sinking, and he survived.
Yeah. Well, one of my favorite things is it's like, what is it, Lightoller? Is that the guy's name? Or there's a part in this book where he says he's one of the crewmen who does live, and he says that he saw him walking around, like stuffing his pants pockets with food and stuff, and like taking big swigs of whiskey and just walking around the boat. And Lightoller, he told Walter, he was like, I saw that guy and was like, I'll never see him again. And he's the first guy he saw when they got on the other ship. I'm like, this man is a hero. There should be statues of him in every pastry shop in America. Like, and when we start talking about the movie, that's probably my favorite part of the movie too.
Same.
It's just so good. It is in like it took like 2 hours and 45 minutes for the
to sink. Right.
for the whole ship to sink. And I know that personally I have thought about how I would get off the Titanic.
Yeah.
But this book made me rethink everything about my escape plan. Just because I while reading it, I had to think to myself, there's no way I would have ever been first class on this boat.
Right.
And I probably would barely even be second. I'd be able to afford a third class passenger ticket. And the way third class was treated in the middle of an emergency, they weren't even allowed to leave third class. They kept telling them that the boats for them were going to come down to them. Like, it was insanity. They had people crawling out windows and crawling up the side of the ship to get onto another deck. Like, it's madness.
It is.
But all of that is happening after every single boat has already gone.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, that was one. So a couple things that I didn't realize, and part of it is probably because I think all of us, we've gone through little moments where you start reading a lot about Titanic, but I felt I was fairly aware of a lot of the different details, but there was certainly stuff here that I didn't realize. So one's like the delays with the telegrams. I thought, or telegrams.
telegram.
What's it called?
Telegraph.
Telegraph. Thank you.
Knock, knock, knock. A telegram.
No, the telegraphs with the delays with that, and then like how fast the boats actually. There's more of a spot between the boats and the sinking than I thought.
Yeah, let's talk about the telegraphs for a minute.
Yeah.
I am mad at the people in that room because that's something that they definitely don't make you aware of. Like, even watching James Cameron's Titanic, watching any version of Titanic, they don't make you aware of how busy those guys were in that room. You have 2 people who are working round the clock in like 2 different shifts, like first shift, second shift, to send out telegrams. People are busting into this room all day long with different telegrams that need to go. I did it. They need to go boop, 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 boop. They're sending those out constantly, all day long, to friends and family, and everyone's like, and it was expensive too. Everyone's sending out these messages like, oh my goodness, look at us, we're on the Titanic, see you in 4 days. But it's consistent, and they really don't have a break. And then when that message came in for them, and it was like, hey guys, icebergs, and the guy was like, shut up, I'm trying to get these messages out. Like, my heart stopped because I wasn't aware how busy they were in that room. I just assumed, like, if a message came in, they would take it and go.
It's another way that the classism reaches out its ugly hands to thwart the survival.
Yeah.
The idea that he is so swamped with these petty messages that he's not even able to fully comprehend what is being sent to him from a security standpoint.
Yeah. And that's one of those things where it's like, this book is just full of red flags. And that one was one major red flag for me.
It really is. With the Titanic, the story about it is just that everything that could go wrong did go wrong. You've got the messages that are not being taken seriously. When they actually do get the message to Smith, he kind of disregards it. You've got Smith, who it seems like he's not a bad guy, but he's probably just so decorated and at the end of his career where he's doing these luxury liners that he's letting certain things go that he should be taking seriously. The Titanic is speeding. It even like, and this I don't think is in the book. I think this is me and my going down a rabbit hole. The whole bit with the sister ship Olympic was she needed repairs, so Titanic was actually delayed by like a month, so it gets put right in the middle of iceberg season. And then with the ships and the technology of the bulkheads, they're like over relying on them, thinking that it is unsinkable because of the way that it's done at like the bottom of the ship.
Yeah.
And then you've got the Californian not giving a fuck. It's just mind-boggling.
Yeah. And if the water hadn't been so smooth, you know, if the moon had actually been out, they would have seen it earlier. Even if they hit the iceberg head on, they still would have survived. Like, there's just so many ways that this could have. It is literally, like, I know we mentioned Greek tragedies a lot. This one is probably peak Greek tragedy. There was no saving Titanic once you reach all of these different endpoints. It's basically like a choose your own adventure game, but you chose wrong each chapter.
That's exactly that.
And all of these were just simple things, like so simple. If any one of those instances had changed, all the people on the ship could have lived.
Right.
And that's what boggles the mind.
Yeah, even if you just have the Californian and they're able to go over, you know, somewhat close to Titanic, and you can have, they genuinely thought that they would be able to put people who are in the lifeboats into another ship and then have the lifeboats go back.
Yeah.
And obviously that's not what happened.
Like, that's what bothers me about this thinking of the Titanic is, even though they never did any drills or anything like that on the boat for lifeboats and the proper way to wear a life vest, the crew still knew enough that was their main plan, was get to another ship and go back. And oh man, stupid Californian, I swear to you, every time they started talking about facts about that boat, I was like, I don't care. I really don't care. When they're shooting off, they're shooting off warning flares from the Titanic, and they're like, must be celebrating. No, they're sinking. They're like, oh, the lights went out. They must have turned. No, they're sinking. Oh, I can't tell if they're doing a distress signal.
The incompetence of the Californian, and you could tell that they are giving those excuses of, you know, just ignorance.
Yeah.
When you know that it's just they don't want to deal with it. And you've got just this comparison between the Californian and the Carpathian, where the captain of the Carpathian gets the information and he's on it. He's like,
Yeah.
okay, so we're moving all the people in the steerage over here. That way we've got space for everybody. I need doctors on each section of the ship. We need to bring out food and blankets. Go as fast as you can to where, we have the last coordinates. And you can tell that he just knows he's not going to make it in time by what hour? Yeah, like at the hour mark.
Yeah.
I mean, imagine being that guy.
Ugh. And that's the thing is like I I can't imagine what it must be like to have been somebody on the Californian and find out next morning what actually happened and find out how close you were.
I just got chills. I can't with
Like
that.
think about that. Like it makes me so depressed.
Yeah.
Like could you imagine being the telegraph guy in that room and being like I went to bed. I turned it off. I went to bed. Or being the other guy who was trying to learn the telegraph, who wasn't technically one of them, and he would go in and listen, and he possibly could have heard the first ever SOS sent from Titanic, and he just didn't twist the knob on the machine to actually get it up and running, so he didn't hear anything.
Yeah.
Like it's I want to cry. If this is the podcast that makes me cry like a baby, it probably will be. Just because it's so many things.
Hey, Nikki?
Just one could have changed it.
Hey, Nikki,
Yeah.
don't be so stern.
Listen, you're lucky you're in another state or I'd kick you in the aft.
Whatever floats your boat.
Oh, God. Oh, God. I can't. This is a serious episode. Super serious. Whatever floats your boat. I hate you.
I do have to admit that I am a 12-year-old kid because, like, when certain things where he said, like, poop deck and semen, I laugh.
Oh, yeah. Every time they were like poop deck, I was like, and I go, Jesse, what's it like being married to a 12-year-old boy? He goes, fabulous.
We tend to be obviously quite feminist on the podcast sometimes, but when he's talking about how ridiculous the women are getting into the boats, I was not offended or anything.
Nope,
like
I
he
agreed.
said, the actual line that he says was, "Women were never more unpredictable."
Yeah.
I hear you. I yes, yeah, it sounds about it. It sounds like there was a bunch of just rich Karens that were annoyed that they weren't in bed.
Yeah. Well, there was that one woman who her friend was going down on a lifeboat and she was like, hope you have your ticket or they won't let you back on in the morning. I was like, you're sinking. Get in a boat. Like, shut up.
Yeah.
That was another instance where you could really tell first class from everybody else. Like,
Right.
First of all, you have that one guy who, here's something that really bothered me about the book was they talk about how the iceberg hit and all of the ice ended up in the section designated for third class.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have first class being like, well, I want to go down there and play with the ice. And they're just running all over third class. Third class can't even get upstairs to a lifeboat. And you have a guy from first class carrying around a chunk of ice asking if they can put it in a Manhattan for him. Like, I'm sorry. What, sir? What's going on? Why don't you go down to third class where they're, still locked in? And why don't you ask them if they want a drink too?
Yeah.
It was so, it made me so angry. I was like, first class would love to take a walk on, like, man, class distinctions, yo. What's up with that? It's just like, sad times. But yeah, the women on this ship, I will say a lot of the women on the ship were very, like, lackadaisical when it came to the actual sinking of the ship. And I get it. You know, you're first class. What do you have to worry about? It's unsinkable. God himself couldn't sink this ship. Yada, yada, yada. But there's that boat with everyone's
Yes.
favorite millionaire, the unsinkable Molly Brown.
Yes. And she's not even referred to like that. She's just like Mrs. Brown.
Yeah, she's just referred to as Mrs. Brown, but they're in that one boat, and the
Hmm.
guy yells at her, and the other guy in the boat is like, "You're talking to a lady." It makes him sit down. But I did find it really interesting that her story is not, especially from the accounts in this book, is not as grandiose as
No, no.
everyone makes it out to be. Everyone's like, "Oh, she commanded a boat, and we all rowed back, and we took all these we saved all these people." No, you didn't. But she did
Right.
organize all those women to row the boat, which I think is, you know, still a good thing. But she never rallied up a troop of women to be like, "Let's go get our men."
Yeah, and I think it's still she's still a strong person, even though it's not, as you said, grandiose as the legend
Yeah.
is around her. Um, but it's like at least with her and then the other one, the one that went back, it's like they did something. It's just
Yeah.
the fact that so many people were perfectly fine to just be in the boats floating off, knowing that they're not going back to get more people, despite having room on the boats. And they're complaining about trivial things like, not having crackers and
Oh,
that
yeah.
it's just,
Oh, yeah, there was a guy smoking in the boat, and it was
yeah,
uncivilized. Like,
right.
listen, lady, after going through that, I would smoke too. I've never smoked a cigarette in my life, but give me 12, I'll chain smoke them.
Yeah.
Never a bad time to start.
And I thought it was funny that you had these crewmen who were so unprepared that people noted that they didn't even know how to put the sails up.
Yeah. It's it's just one thing after another. And oh my
Yeah.
god. I will say, you know, we are lucky now. I feel like no matter what, something like Titanic was always going to happen
Hmm.
because we as a civilization needed it to happen. And I know that sounds really disgusting, but think about how the world would be today if we had never had the sinking of the Titanic, the regulations that we have now. You
I was
know,
going to say change the regulations on.
yeah, we have like a whole group of people who are dedicated to making sure, they must still be a thing, looking at the icebergs. But I don't know anyone who takes ocean liners for travel. So, so don't quote me on that, but it might still be a thing. But that's something that we
Wait,
had.
what are you saying? Are you wondering if icebergs are still a thing?
No, if that team of people who are supposed to go out there and monitor the ice is still a thing.
Oh, yeah, I'm pretty sure.
I think it's still a thing. They're just not doing it for luxury ocean liners anymore. But like we have that, we have stronger regulations on lifeboats and life vests. We no longer have a class distinction when it comes to getting into a lifeboat. Like it changed so much. We don't even have the celebutantes that we did back in the day because we didn't actually have movie stars yet when the Titanic sank. So it
Yeah, that's a
wasn't
good point.
like people were writing about Clark Gable. It was people were writing about the Strausses and all of this. So we were inundated as a people with the heroic stories of the Titanic and a lot of really racist stories about the Titanic. Like, stuff about how my favorite. Let me talk about how they talked badly about the Italians for a minute on the boat. Like there were some things in here that just didn't. I There are things that I guess I never thought would be was the blatant. I don't know. I guess I always assume. And I guess I'm just like a Disney princess. I just assume that a big tragedy bonds you together for life.
Yeah.
It's a lie. Because they were saying what was it? Oh, With the lost world went some of its prejudices, especially a firm and loud-voiced opinion of the superiority of Anglo-Saxon courage. I was like, as soon as I read that line, I was like, I'm not going to like what follows. They said that all who jumped from the deck were Armenians and Frenchmen or Italians, and it got so bad that when they were doing all of the inquiries into the Titanic afterwards, Steward Crowe said there were various men passengers, probably Italians or some foreign nationality other than English or American, who attempted to rush the boats, and the Italian ambassador demanded and got an apology from him for that sort of racist rhetoric against my people. We can swim.
It's this thing where you've got the third class passengers and they're literally like locked and cannot escape third class. Then by the time that they are out, it's very clear that this ship is going under. So of course there is more of a panic at that point. And they're being treated like they're animals, but I don't think that the first class passengers are doing the same thing who are still on the boat. Like it's just like they're using that as an example, like see how animalistic they are, but they're trying to live. They're trying to escape with their lives, and you're forcing them into this panic. And I can't imagine. I feel so bad for the people who didn't speak English and they cannot communicate to the crewmen to figure out where they need to go, what's happening, what do they need to do, to the point where they can't even figure out how to put on like the life jacket because they can't hear the instructions. How frustrating and sad that is.
And see, those are the stories I wish we had more of. And that's why I really like this book, because it really highlights not so much like the grandiose nature of what first class was and how beautiful first class is, which we all know. Yeah, you had China and stuff, great. But the degree, until reading this book, I don't think I really fully understood the degree of which first and third were separated. And I think a lot of that is because of Titanic and because we don't really have these sort of class distinctions when you travel. I mean, unless you count first class on an airplane, which you would know, I wouldn't. Whatever. I think it's like that, where I don't think in my mind I really understood the severity of what third class went through until I read the numbers in this book.
Yeah.
And that was what, like, when they talk about Colonel Gracie, when he was saying that he assumed all the women and children had gotten off the boat because all the lifeboats had left. And then all those women from third class showed up. And he was, like, devastated by it.
That's awful.
Apparently, according to the book, the casualty list included 4 out of 143 first-class women, 3 were by choice, 15 of 93 second-class women, and 81 of 179 third-class women, and that doesn't even begin to talk about the children.
Again, goosebumps.
Yeah. The kids, except for one first-class child, all the other ones got off the boat. That's 29 first and second class children were saved, and only 23 out of 76 steerage children were saved.
Disgusting.
It's awful. It is. Like, I have reading that again, I have goosebumps because it's, how could you as a human being be on that boat and know?
Mm-hmm.
I find it hard to believe that some people didn't know.
What's your opinion too? Because this is one that at first it kind of makes sense, the whole women and children thing, because you're making the assumption that which is, sexist assumption, but you're making the assumption that men may be better at swimming than the women. So let's get them to safety. That way, in case a ship does go down, men might be able to survive in the water better than the women can. But because it's like, I get it, but it's almost like you're giving even more tragedy, because there are families now that are ripped apart. You've
Yeah.
got widows and they now have no husband and kids without a father. So it's like, what's worse? You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it gets even harder when you realize that at that time women didn't work. So
Exactly.
so not
Exactly.
only do you have a widow and you have these kids who don't have their father, you have a woman who's now like, how do I feed these kids that I now have?
Yeah. Now I got to go be a seamstress or whatever.
Yeah, and might as well go work at that Triangle Shirtwaist Factory. That sounds like a good job. Sorry. Let's not say we did. It's just it is everything falls apart when it gets to
Yeah.
that sort of situation where and I like you, I get it. I understand the meaning behind it and I understand the chivalry, I guess you can say, behind women and children first. I definitely agree children
Oh,
always.
certainly. Certainly. Yeah.
Like children like I don't know, like 13 and under, I guess. Get on in a
Yeah.
boat. Um but I do it is sad when you think about just splitting up a family like that, especially when you
Hmm.
think about it in the context of the half full boats of Titanic. You could have
Makes me
fit
sick.
families in those boats.
Yeah.
But when I think about it in like today's view, sorry, I feel like it's every man for himself. Which
I don't I think everybody thinks about like what would you do if you're on the ship, and I don't think there's any way to assume how you would act until you're
yeah.
actually in that situation.
Yeah. Have you thought about how you would have survived Titanic if you were on that boat?
I have for years thought about it, and of course now being married gives me a different perspective to think about it. But at the end of the day, like I just said, I don't think I can assume what would happen. Even, I mean, like you said, we wouldn't even be in first class. We would
Yeah.
probably second class. So even that distinction, because second class out of all the movies and even this book is probably the one that is least talked about because
Yeah.
it is not as separated as first and third. That's where, the interesting stuff is. So even second class, it's hard to say exactly what I would do. I assume that you have a plan.
Yeah, I used to think long and hard about how I could get off the boat in a specific set time limit. I'm sure that one day someone's going to make a reality show called like Escape the Titanic or something. And it's going to be 6 contestants and they all have to figure out how to get off the boat without using a lifeboat. And my thought process, because as an adult, as a fully formed adult, I know that I'd be third class, so I know this plan would fail. But had I been first or second, and knowing what I know about how the rooms were set up, I always imagined me and whoever I am rooming with, whether it be my family or I guess right now, Jesse, if we were first or second class, I would definitely have him help me take a giant armoire out of our room. And we would find the lowest point closest to the water and throw it in. And we would both jump in. And then we'd climb into the armoire and use it as a flotation boat.
See, and I've thought about this too. That our favorite baker, who's throwing stuff that can
Yeah.
float, ripping apart the deck chairs and throwing it into the water. Like, why didn't more people think about that? Like, take stuff that could possibly be used as a flotation device and kind of prepare yourself a little bit. I mean, that's the smartest thing to do. But I guess I don't know. Just
I
I think
think
about it.
I think it's easy for us to view it from
Exactly.
this perspective. But I think in the moment when it first happened, people didn't understand the severity of the situation when they were
Right.
in it. And then by the time it became a severe situation, it was almost too late to even worry about how am I going to float when I'm in the water. It was more like, how do I get off this stupid boat and not die? And
Yeah.
unfortunately, I mean, there really was no answer to that.
So I do think we need to talk about the elephant in the room, which is that I'm reading the book and they say that the Titanic went down without mentioning the break in half. And I knew this. I knew that they didn't know about
Yeah.
the break until what is it, 1985, when they discover it
Yeah.
sunken. Which, by the way, like I get so excited when I think about that. Like I can't even imagine being in that submersible and finding the Titanic. Oh my God, I would die. No,
Okay,
I'm such
James
like
Cameron.
I know I'm like a weird fangirl. I have to say, I was obsessed with the James Cameron movie when it came out. It was the first movie that I geeked out about. I was only like, we were what, like 7, 8 years old when it
Yeah.
came out. It was the first like adult movie that I was excited for, and then I manipulated all of the adults around me to me to see it multiple times. And I don't know. There's something about Titanic that I'm a fangirl about, but they don't realize that it broke in half until it is found in the 80s. And I knew that, but I forgot about it. So when I'm reading the book, I'm like, wait a minute, where's the break in the half? And there's a lot of, it's quite contested exactly how all of that went down.
Yeah.
That went down.
Oh.
I didn't try that one.
Oh.
No, but do you have thoughts on it?
I actually read an article from Scientific American about it.
Yeah.
Because Jesse and I did get into an argument. I feel like at some point in everybody's lives, they have to have the argument about the breakage of the Titanic. I don't think anyone. There's probably a bunch of people out there who are like, I've never thought about it enough to argue about it. Well,
That's
you're thinking about it now. I remember hearing that the whole thing about it breaking in half. And like you, I saw the James Cameron version, and I always assumed it was that violent.
Right.
I was always like, oh my goodness, it broke, like the whole deck just broke right in half, like flames, clutching my pearls. Oh, but especially after reading this and doing a little bit more research, especially with Scientific American, I understand the breakage a lot better, and it's not. Ladies and gentlemen, spoiler alert, it does not break like James Cameron would like you to think it did. It's the way it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're the expert, you're the Titanic expert.
No, I have access to too much of the internet.
So much internet, so little time. It's, the way it sounded to me was that, the breakage occurred on the bottom, because in 1998 they actually found a large portion of the side of the ship, which indicated that it did not break fully side by, like in a symmetrical break. It was an asymmetrical break of the ship, and it was on the bottom, which also explains why so many people were not very concerned at the beginning. And it wasn't until the hull really went under that the breakage started to become an issue. And the back of the ship was tilted, but not to the extreme severity of what James Cameron would like you to believe. Once again, I'm just going to keep throwing that out there in case anyone wants to fight me on this. It does not go straight up and down like a skyscraper. It's slightly tilted until it breaks fully, and then it's submerged. I wish you could see my hands, because I did the whole thing with my arms. Jesse's over there watching me going, yeah, you did it. I did the thing with the arms.
No, that theory I think makes the most sense.
Yeah.
And there's what, like, people have a lot of theories about the Titanic.
Oh yeah. Listen, there are people out there who don't think it was real. So
there are several like of the most popular theories, and that I think is the one that's like widely accepted for today. And it makes sense, especially when you consider that people who were in the lifeboats, there actually were some people who were like, hey, that ship broke in half. Like they realized that something had happened, and it wasn't just straight into the water going down. And that would make sense that it's not, if the thing actually was bobbing up in the air, like in the James Cameron one, more people would remember that. That's not exactly something that you forget about.
I'm sorry,
and
the
it
Californian would have seen that. Let's get real.
Right. Yeah. Piece of shit Californian. So it also makes more sense when you think about the people like our favorite baker who were able to survive, if that is how the back half was going in. Right.
Yeah. No, I think that out of all the stuff that I read about it, that one did make the most sense, and they had the facts to back it up. You know, with how it would have, because it really does make the most sense, because I'm sorry, if I'm a first class passenger and I'm like, ugh, I'm not getting in that boat. Those aren't the people I played bridge with last night. And I saw a crack on the top of the ship, I'd be like, we'll play bridge now. Let's go. But nobody did that. It wasn't.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't think I think we solved it. We cracked this case.
I thought of another pun, but I don't know how to work it in. You want to hear it?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. The iceberg was a weapon of mass destruction.
Oh, I'm so glad I didn't start the podcast with "Ice to see you, Christina."
That's about where I'm at. Batman and Robin.
Oh, nice job.
Do you want to switch over to the movie now?
Yeah, let's get into the movie.
Yeah. So the movie that we are doing is a 1958 adaptation. It's the same name, same plot. I mean, it's the same stuff, and it's directed by Roy Ward Baker. But I do think that we will also dip into the James Cameron Titanic, just because it's so difficult to not talk about that when you watch this movie. I mean, there are too many similarities between the two to exclude it.
Why?
Yeah.
And I think that when you talk about Titanic in general, it's hard to not bring up the most, the biggest blockbuster one. Like,
well, it's one of the biggest movies of all time still. So everybody's seen it. It's not exactly something that you can dismiss.
Yeah. And it's long. Yeah. Oh my God. We all deserve a Medal of Honor for sitting through that one.
I still love Titanic. I love that stupid movie so much.
I'm gonna make Christina really mad right now.
Go ahead.
I actually was not a big fan of Titanic when I first saw it.
Really? When did you first see it?
I saw it as a kid. Listen, my family rented that movie from Blockbuster. It was 2 VHS tapes, and they had to rubber band the two of them together. And I feel like in my mind that they counted as 2 checkouts at Blockbuster, because they were 2 separate VHS tapes.
Yeah.
I think that's what happened, because they did the same thing with The Perfect Storm. That's why you're not in business anymore, Blockbuster. I'm watching you.
Oh, no.
No, I miss you, Blockbuster. Come back. But I can remember crying at the end of Titanic because of all the dogs that they showed going on the boat on the first VHS tape. And I can remember crying about that.
I don't want to think about the doggies.
But when I watched A Night to Remember, I was depressed from beginning to end.
Yeah.
Like, this movie, it hit something, like, it hit some emotional core inside of me. And I think it's all going back to the book and how everything that you're seeing on that screen is just a reenactment of the actual things that people were saying to each other and doing. And I was gutted. By the end of the movie, I was completely gutted. Jesse was depressed. I was depressed. I was like, I guess we'll go for a walk now.
I was mad. I was like fueled by rage. The one that gets me, and I hope I say his name correctly, but was it Lucian Smith?
Oh, yeah. Yes.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Him and his wife and their kids are in the book, but I think that they were selected to be a little bit more highlighted in the movie. And it is so depressing to me when he goes to Mr. Andrews and he asks him how serious it is and says that he's a man that's not going to panic. Andrews tells him, you need to get your wife and your kids onto the boat. It's sinking. And the look on his face is just, he is just gutted. And then when he goes to his wife and he puts the necklace around her neck, which was completely stolen and put in the Titanic. I'm
going to start crying now.
I know. I'm sorry. He tells her to get the kids, and her look, she recognizes that he knows that something is going to happen, but neither of them say anything. Neither of them freak out. They have to keep their children. And then when they go and she goes onto the boat, oh my God, it's so well done, and it's so depressing because you know it's real. You know
Yeah.
that's exactly what happened, and you kind of see him like he's about to cry. Oh,
Oh my God, and he's holding
I,
his son in his arms and he's asleep and it's like
I
he has
can't.
that one extra moment where he hugs him really tight.
Yeah, yeah. The only thing that made me be able to not cry is that racist little doll.
I'm crying right now.
Oh no, I'm sorry.
Jesse keeps looking at me like, "You good?" No, I'm not good.
No, I definitely cried. I cried throughout the movie. It's good.
It
It's
was
it's honestly a really good movie. I don't want to sound like prejudicial against like the British filmmaking, but when you compared some of the stuff that was going on with American Hollywood and what they were doing over with the British filmmaking, some of it doesn't really compare,
yeah.
And this movie is just so well done. I mean, it holds up for the most part, except for some kind of weak matting that they did with the lifeboats, but I mean that's me just being picky.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with you on that one. But it was definitely like I I I loved it from beginning to end, and I think what just like the book, what's so great about the movie is like, yeah, you have a few establishing situations at the beginning,
The
but
train ride was unnecessary. Like I didn't know why they included
yeah,
that.
I think it was more to like let us know like, oh, these are the main ones we're following, but we're gonna
Because it doesn't,
follow the boat as a whole.
and it's that part. That's the only thing that I think that James Cameron does a lot better is having the main characters are established and they are just plot like they're just devices to get you around that ship and
Yeah,
to understand the locations and stuff. And there's really not much of a main character in this movie. In my opinion, like I know that they try to force it, but I don't
yeah.
think that works for me.
No, and I think it's like the book. I think that's what makes the book so dry is that you're jumping around so much, you don't really get a chance to like you're connecting emotionally 100%, but there's no one person that you're following around the ship like the
Right.
James Cameron version. But I like that this movie you have those quick snippets at the beginning and then it's just like boom, here we are again, iceberg.
Right.
There's none of that other frilly stuff. I don't need to know you have your own private promenade deck, whatever. Um, but I do want one. I mean, I'll take it. But it was just, I like how it's a quick film too. It's maybe like, I think it was like an hour 25 or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's quick and it's to the point and it is so depressing. And when they start showing the Californian,
I know.
even when they talk to their captain,
Yeah.
I was like, ugh. I was like, get out of here. We don't need you.
I love that they included the Californian in the movie.
Yeah.
I was prepared for it to be excluded since it's, not in the James Cameron one, but it is just so shocking that a group of people would allow that to happen that I'm very glad that it's still in the movie.
And that's something that I know because I did read the trivia over and over. I did see Titanic like 100 times, even though it's not one of my favorite ones. I know that James Cameron shot that and then was like, no, we don't need it. I think
Yeah.
I know why he would omit it from his film. I think it should be there because once again, we get most of our information about important events from film and television and books. And when you admit something so large as this, you kind of forget that it was even a thing. Like I didn't realize how close the Californian was to Titanic until we read the book. And then seeing it acted out in the movie just brought back a lot of that anger. And it wasn't so much like rage anymore like I did with the book. It was just this guttural sadness of like, I wanted to jump through the screen and shake somebody and just be like, go. You are literally watching them die. Just go. And no one went.
Well, the entire story of Titanic is just this examination of human morality and compassion and pride. And in omitting the Californian, you're omitting just this lack of all of that. It's
Yeah.
just complete disregard for what you have to do to be a human and care.
It's just,
It's the story of the Genovese girl who, is screaming and getting murdered, and all these people are just like, well, somebody else will pick up the phone and call.
Yep.
I don't need to. It's not my responsibility to do that.
like, I don't mind being a witness to history, but you want to be the right type of witness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't want to be it's see something, say something. Come on. Like, you don't want to be the type of person who walks by a situation and goes, not my problem. In this case, it's everyone's problem. Like,
Right.
you're the only one out there. It is your problem. It's just, it's, oh God. I'm feeling it again. You know what I mean?
I know.
Like, I'm sitting in my feelings and I don't like it.
I was very happy, though, that in the movie they include our baker.
Oh, yeah. The baker in the movie version of
So
A Night
funny.
to Remember is honestly, they needed him. If they didn't have him,
They
I
do.
would have cried from beginning to end.
He is the sweetest comic relief, and the fact that it is not made up, and he really do you remember
Yeah.
the part when he's drunk? He's super drunk, and he plays drunk so well. Like, that's such a hard thing for actors to do, and he is just like a boss. And he goes to step down into the water.
Oh,
and
he gets wet. He's like,
and he kind of like floats his foot a little bit, like he's not too sure, like he doesn't have his, he's like off, so he
Yeah.
can't figure out where to step because there's water.
when he's drunk and throwing all that stuff overboard, and the people are in the water below him, and he's just looking down at him, and he's like, It's very. Everyone should watch it because it is the perfect masterclass in like it's like he studied Charlie Chaplin and was like,
Yes.
how would
Yeah.
Charlie Chaplin act if he was on the Titanic? And that was it. It was perfect. I was like, this is my guy. This is my friend. I am hanging with him until the bitter. Like, I want to bake with you.
Yeah.
Like, that's where it comes down to. I want to hang out with you forever. Be my friend. Like,
Now, I have a question for you.
uh-oh.
Okay. At what point did you realize how much of this James Cameron was quote unquote inspired by? Like, at what point were you like, oh?
Like, basically beginning to end. Like, when you think about it, like, the establishing shot in this film is everyone getting on the boat. The establishing shot in James Cameron, everybody getting on the boat. It's
Even the title. The title is for James Cameron. It's that like the water underneath the title card Titanic, and then in this it's the full opening credits, but it's over the water. It's like very similar.
And then it's no more like there. For anyone who's seen both and doesn't believe us, definitely watch the scene with Mr. Andrews.
Yeah.
That is literally shot for shot remake. Like,
You're always going to have comparisons when you talk about people who are tackling stuff that happened in real life. That's always going to happen. I think that you and I both tend to watch a lot of, biographical, like biopics.
Yeah.
This is different. This is not just it's the same story, because even when when he gets on the lifeboat, and it's the same shot, it's just flipped.
Yeah.
And because it's just him when he's looking like sad, and then you see the Titanic in the background, it's the same.
Yeah. Or the party scene in Steerage.
Yeah.
A party scene in Steerage. I was like, you have to be kidding me. It's so similar. I was like, I don't even want to watch James Cameron's because I think I just did.
There's weird stuff like with Molly Brown. Like we said, she's referred to as Mrs. Brown in the book, and there's no part of her in the book where she's talking about her life or her past. And in Night to Remember, it's the same thing where she's telling a group of people about how her and her husband were so poor that she hid the money in
Yeah, in the
the
stove.
oven, and he lit a fire, and then that shows up in James Cameron's Titanic.
It's just add a few imaginary characters into A Night to Remember, and you have the sinking of the Titanic from James Cameron's Titanic.
I was getting upset when I was watching A Night to Remember because of all of the similarities. Then I watched the James Cameron one. I'm like, man, this is still such a good fucking movie, though. Like,
I will say the CGI in James Cameron's does not hold up.
I completely disagree. I
Oh,
completely
no,
disagree.
no, 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 no. Go back and watch. Go back and watch when Jack's at the front of the boat and he's saying, you know, I'm king of the world, and they pan back and
Yeah,
all the people are CGI people. I looked at Jesse and I was
I know.
like, is this a
Yeah.
side mission on James Bond Goldeneye? That's what this looks like.
The one part that is a CGI fail that I noticed even back when I was a kid, and it makes me laugh, is when it's Jack and Rose and they're running out of the water and it's like, coming down on them. It's clearly two stunt doubles, and then they put
Yeah.
Jack and Rose's faces over those bodies, which is just like the modern day version of my favorite film flaw, which is the poorly disguised
Oh,
stunt
the
double.
mustache?
It's just, yes.
We'll fix it in post.
Yeah.
Please
I
don't.
think it largely still holds up. So,
Okay then. Oh, and there are also like other little bits too that just, I don't know. It was just like James Cameron basically just ripped this entire film.
yeah.
It was like, that looks good. Let's do it. But it also
Mhm.
makes sense too because Walter Lord was, I keep wanting to say Walter Lloyd for some reason. Walter Lord was an advisor to James Cameron
Right.
when he
Right.
did Titanic. So that makes sense. And also, he wrote the book for the other movie. So I think there's going to be a lot of parallels over there. I do wish James Cameron would have had more of the Baker. More Baker,
Yeah.
less having sex in a car.
And it's weird because with as long as Titanic is, there are certain things that I think are a little bit more successful in A Night to Remember that is so much shorter. But like Mr. Andrews, when they hit the iceberg, then Mr. Andrews actually like goes down to
Yeah.
inspect what happened from the inside, and you see him in the movie climbing down this ladder, and he kind of steps into water. And then it's almost the same scene where he is, showing the map to Captain Smith and says it's a mathematical certainty. But like that little cut of him not going down to the bottom, I don't know. In a weird way, I just thought that that was kind of an important moment for him.
Yeah, because when he decides to go down with the ship in James Cameron's version, it's part of it is not like I didn't fully understand his reasoning behind
Yeah.
not trying to fight it. Whereas after reading the book and watching the film of A Night to Remember, you understand more of Andrews as a person and how much he actually cared about each person on that ship. He was very, friendly with everybody in first class, and he really cared about the boat itself. So in the book and in the movie, when he goes down there and he sees what's actually happening with his own eyes and he fully grasps the
Right. Right.
severity of the situation, it makes more sense as to why he feels so defeated when you see him standing alone in that room later.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of little moments that are included in A Night to Remember, like when you see, and it's a pretty cool shot too, because it's like from behind the guy in the like safe room, basically, all of these people flocking to get
Yeah,
their
they're
jewelry.
valuables, yeah.
Yeah, their valuables out of like the storage section, and the guy's just completely swamped by them, and they're just like throwing their tickets at him, and I was just like, again, like I was so sick to my stomach looking at that.
And I think that was done so well in the movie because I think that's juxtaposed against the scene with the other guy in his stateroom, and
Yes, yes.
he has his wooden box open and it has, deeds and titles and like has all of this money in this box and all this jewelry and stuff, and all he took out of there was like a pocket watch or like a little pin or something, and he walks out of the room and leaves the box wide open.
Yeah.
And I think that really helped to showcase a lot of the information from the book, where you're like, there were first class passengers who were not crappy people.
Yeah.
Like, they knew. Jesse's over there going, but there were some I'm fighting you now. There were some first class passengers who weren't awful. They didn't. But then again, you also have to think they didn't think that they were going to be off the boat that long either. So.
Yeah, and another one from like the other perspective is when the third class people are able to. There's a group that are able to escape, and again, it's like you just slap Tommy Doyle over it, and that's that character.
And what's the other one?
Titanic.
Fabrizio.
Fabrizio. Everybody loves Fabrizio.
Hey, every Italian's named Fabrizio, I guess. Couldn't think of a new name. I mean,
yeah, Tommy and Fabrizio.
Yeah. Fabrizio was the name of the guy who helped us with our wedding. so I know Fabrizio. He totally got off the boat. You guys don't worry.
No, when the group of third class people are able to escape and then they go into the first class dining room, and they're moving quickly so that they can try to escape, and then they just pause. They're like, oh, this is first class.
Yeah.
And they see how drastically different those people were treated.
Yeah, and that was a great part of the book too, because I'm watching that in the movie and I'm reading it in the book, and I'm thinking to myself, if this is the first time I'm coming up to first class, wouldn't I want a memento of this moment? And it's once, like in the book and in the movie, they're living through the mindset that if they break something or if they take something, they're gonna have to pay for it afterwards.
Yeah.
And that doesn't come across, the situation for third class doesn't really come across in James Cameron's version. Where like they have that one moment where they have the guy who's like, "You're gonna have to pay for that."
It's the same. It's so close with that guy. It like I can't.
I know. Hey, James Cameron, I too can steal movies. I'll make my own Titanic, and I'll call it A Night to Remember. It's just kind of crazy, and
even in the boiler room, when you've got the same thing where it's the guys who are escaping, and the door is coming down like right on the guy's foot, and it's in Titanic, and the only difference is that he put slow motion over it.
Yeah, he slides in real slow.
Yeah.
It's funny when Christina and I were talking about really what film to talk about with this book, we went back and forth a lot. But after, I can remember texting you and going, "Let me know when you watch A Night to Remember. I'm definitely certain we could talk about both." I was like, I think we got this. And it's true, because the whole thing is basically the same, with the exception of the romance added in.
Yeah, like I said, I was probably a little prejudicial about it being, both 1950s and British and stuff, that I was concerned that the production quality might not be as high, but it's actually really good. Like the sets are quite impressive.
Yeah.
They are actually they're very impressive. So they're extremely impressive. They're very big. Stuff like the boiler rooms, it's just as large. It's well done. Yeah. And I thought, okay, so we can just do this movie. That's fine. But then the minute that I started seeing all of the constant overlaps between this and Titanic, it's hard not to talk about both.
Yeah, they are literally like the same.
In
some instances, they're just the same.
Yeah, I think that both are. People should watch both. I think both are worth a watch. Where James Cameron succeeds is, like I said, he's able to seamlessly take two characters and have them explore the entirety of the ship so that the audience is able to understand where everything is at, so that when the sinking occurs, they're not lost in the action. It's all quite clear. And then I do think that he also has better tension between the iceberg hitting and when things start to go really crazy. Like that part I think is super well done from a
Well,
directing
he
standpoint.
really sped it up.
Yeah, he did.
Like, honestly, the sinking in James Cameron's happens so unbelievably fast that if you don't know the actual like timing of it, which the other film and the book both do really well, you would assume that they literally had like 30 minutes to get off that ship.
See, again, I kind of disagree just a little bit. It's like he did speed certain things up, but it's half the movie. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a decent amount of time.
Well, I think like especially when you think about uh the the hull in the front filling up with
Right.
water. It
Yeah,
immediately
yeah.
filled, and all of a sudden the boat was automatically leaning. And then
Sure,
after
yeah.
reading the descriptions in the book of how each class felt the iceberg hit, in Cameron's there's a shot of Mr. Andrews in his, I guess, stateroom or whatever, and his chandelier is shaking wildly and his drink is
Right.
shaking. But when you read the actual description from the book,
That doesn't
they
happen until way later. Yeah.
yeah, they're like, oh, it felt like they turned off. Did they turn off the engines? That's what the
Yeah.
first class thought, and third class was like, I think we just got hit by a train.
Guys, that's not how it works.
Yeah.
No trains nearby.
Fun fact: you're in the ocean.
Yeah, no, that yes, I agree with that because I like how it's done in the movie where it's the guys who are sitting and they're playing poker and
Oh
they're just
yeah.
chilling like the whole time.
Oh, they're
And
great. Those
yeah,
guys, the whole they keep cutting out to like the main deck, and they're like, "Get down the lifeboats," and then they cut back to the first class lounge, and the men are like, got any threes?" And it's like, oh.
and at one point he looks down at like his scotch or whatever it is in his glass and he's like, "Huh, they might be listing."
Yeah. I'm like, I wish I could be first class. Just once. Just once. Maybe not on that ship, but you know.
Yeah.
They look like they have fun. But
No,
yeah,
but
I think
that's the crazy thing about Titanic is it's what 2 hours and 40 minutes. I mean, think about 2 hours and 40 minutes. Like, it's so kind of subtle at first, and then when it starts to go nuts, it's just mass
yeah.
chaos.
The length of James Cameron's Titanic is the amount of time you have to get off the boat.
Crazy.
So, on the count of 3. See, I'm already ramping up my Titanic game show. TM, 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 TM. Escape the Titanic. TM, TM, TM.
See, I would go to Escape the Titanic and the whole time be like, "Wow, this is bad taste."
Yeah.
Where do I buy my ticket?
Well, you and I have both done
I
the
know.
Titanic exhibit. I was waiting to talk about this. Christina and I both, when we were living in Orlando, we both did the Titanic exhibit. I don't think we did it together,
No,
unfortunately, but
unfortunately.
we have visited the Titanic exhibit. There's another one in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. Actually, I don't know if that one's still open. I loved the Titanic exhibit.
I did too. I did too.
It's first of all, it's a little cheesy. I mean, you have the backdrop of the grand staircase.
I loved it.
It's ever did you when you bought your tickets to go to the Titanic, did you see all those like wedding photos
Yeah.
where you could plan your Hey guys.
Carlos is lucky that I didn't drag him to the Titanic experience for our wedding.
Hey, we're taking our wedding photos here on the Titanic, the ship of dreams. Cuz that's not a poor sign for a relationship, is it? I loved that they had like one dish.
Yeah.
They had like one of the actual dishes. They had the recreation of all the staterooms.
Yeah.
My goodness. And I don't know about you, but my favorite parts were the one where you touch your hand against the ice to see how cold the water is, and then when they take you out onto the deck.
Yeah. Yeah, I loved that. And then I also, when I was a kid, went on the Queen Mary in California, and they had like a little Titanic exhibit set up there, and they had some of the artifacts and stuff, and I was like living my best nerdy 8-year-old life.
Living the
I
dream.
I think I told you too, because during the tour they said something about how the Queen Mary was larger than the Titanic, and I started arguing with the with the tour guy, like, no, it's not. Titanic was huge.
Excuse me, I'm
But
a
Titanic,
Titanic historian.
but I was just a stupid little kid. But it's funny when you look at the Titanic compared, like little drawings, compared to cruise ships nowadays. I mean, if
Yeah.
you've been on a cruise ship, you've basically been on something bigger than Titanic, most likely.
Could you imagine? Like if the Titanic were still a thing, and lining it up next to like what, the Disney Magic or Carnival
Right.
Cruise?
Swamped. Yeah.
Yeah,
Dwarfed.
little baby ship. Oh, that's cute. Oh, really? Ship of Dreams? That's fun. We're gonna go see Mickey Mouse now.
See, and in A Night to Remember, they don't focus so much in on the size. That's
Yeah.
definitely a Cameron thing too, where he takes all of those shots at the beginning of the movie to show how massive it is at that time.
And I wonder if that's because even with like the movie being out in 1958 and stuff, I wonder if it's also because they didn't need to expand upon it because it was still
Right.
it's still kind of, I don't want to say it's still fresh. I mean, years have gone by, but especially for it being a British film, the ship was made in England and Ireland. So
No, yeah, that's a good point.
I
Yeah,
wonder if
and
that
you're talking
wasn't
about
something they had
90.
to expand upon.
Right. I do want to give James Cameron another compliment. There were certain things in the book that I really liked, where it's always the details. It's the
Yeah.
little details that get you. So one of them is that when the ship hits and then Ismay comes out, because he's like, "Oh, I'm not part of the crew. I'm just a passenger."
Yeah.
So when he comes out, he's wearing his slippers. So they talk about his slippers and the sound the slippers make on the carpet, and then in Cameron's, it specifically includes a close up of the slippers like walking, and there's a lot of like weird things like that, that's included in it that I think are important.
Yeah. I think that if you were to do a mashup of the two that only focused on that sinking portion, I think it would probably be a pretty complete version of events.
Right.
I did find it interesting, reading some of the trivia for A Night to Remember, how many survivors from the Titanic actually went to the
Yeah.
set. I think I did get emotional when I read that Captain
I
Smith's
know you're
daughter
what you're
went.
gonna
Oh my
talk. Yeah.
goodness. I read that and I was just like, no, it's fine. It's cool. Because the actor looked so much like her dad. Like, ugh. Or
Yeah. And
the other guy who wanted to jump into the set.
yeah. Yeah.
Like he basically had like, he was a second class passenger who had like survivor's remorse.
Mm-hmm.
And they were filming the sinking of the boat, and he tried to get on the set to like symbolically go down with the ship. And those are things that, Cameron couldn't have that,
Mm-hmm.
just, based off of 1997 versus 1958.
So heartbreaking.
Yeah, it's just so crazy. But I think that's the other reason why A Night to Remember really holds up, is because you really did have, the focus really was on the exact, things
People.
that did happen. Because
Yeah.
Cameron does take a lot of liberties, especially with Officer Murdoch
Murdoch. Yeah.
shooting himself and everything.
Yeah.
Because this was one of those things I remember when I was a kid and I saw that and I was just shocked, flabbergasted. And then, you do your research on Titanic and you're like, wait a minute. Wait. That didn't happen. None of that happened. Why would you do that? He has family who actually, like, they objected to how he was being represented, and a Fox vice president had to deliver a personal apology to the family and then donated a
Right.
bunch of money to to the school that I think he went to. I was like, that is so insane.
The one liberty that I thought was interesting, aside from that is included in the James Cameron one, is the shot that you see of Captain Smith, because when he dies, when it's like the water crushing in, and he grabs the steering wheel, it's such a Hollywood shot.
Yeah.
And it's so kind of heavy-handed of, the captain going down with the ship where he's literally holding it. And in the book, it's repeatedly mentioned that all of these different people made up probably different allegations of them seeing him for the last time. So there was never a consistent, we saw him do this.
Yeah.
Between the survivors. It was very confusing. People thought that they saw him last on the ship. Some said that he was in the water. Some said that he was, standing at the back still trying to save people. None of the time kind of fits. It's clear that he was doing his best to control people, not control people, but, be the leader of the crewmen trying to save people. And then at a certain point, it's consistent that he went around saying, every man for himself, you have to go, I release you, try to survive. But then after that, it's very muddy.
Yeah. And I think that that's where, like, the book and the movie of A Night to Remember really make him into a bigger hero.
Yeah.
Than James Cameron's version does. James Cameron's version makes him kind of almost like wants to be a hero, but doesn't know how. Whereas the muddled events in the book from everybody at least let you know that each person who claims they saw him doing something active, versus something passive, which I think really helps to build his character, because he was a really big. I think they even mentioned in the book people used to sail on ships because they knew he was the captain.
Yeah, he was like this weird maritime celebrity.
Yeah.
Weird thing to
Pick
say.
up Maritime Monthly. This month's centerfold, Captain Smith.
He was the maritime influencer of 19. Early 1900s.
Look out, ladies. He's taken.
Oh boy. I think the one thing that everybody can agree on, though, is that Ismay is a piece of shit.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Yes. Listen, just if James Cameron wanted to make anybody shoot themselves, why not? Well, and thanks to A Night to Remember, I know that he actually ended up becoming a super alcoholic, and
yeah,
he had a lot of problems, and you know what? Rightly so.
Yeah.
Rightly so. You cannot have it both ways.
There's so many villains with the story of Titanic, between the iceberg itself, the Californian, even some decisions that Captain Smith made. But then Ismay directly was in charge of the reason why it was speeding. He wanted to get there at a certain time. He then, saves himself in the lifeboat.
Yeah.
And I thought that part was pretty well done in the movie, because it's fairly fast in the book, where he's kind of helping. He's helping the loading of the lifeboats, and then the guy just sees that he's now sitting in the boat. But the movie makes it more dramatic, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I agree.
And by movie, I mean A Night to Remember.
Yeah. No, yeah. Not Titanic, where after Cal had already paid a man to let him on the ship. Oh, Cal.
Okay. I've got some thoughts on Cal, but we don't have time.
No, we didn't read the novelization of the movie Titanic, but I have a lot of thoughts on Rose, a lot of thoughts on Cal. Don't even get me started on Jack. I mean, wait, can I just say one thing though?
Yeah, I was going to say, I need to say one thing real quick.
just want to say one thing. If you are watching James Cameron's Titanic, after they run through the boiler room and they have sex in the car and they get up on top of the deck, Rose looks at Jack and says, I'm going to get off the boat with you. When we get to New York, I'm getting off the boat with you. Had the Titanic not sunk, they still had what? Like 2-3 days left on that boat? Where are you sleeping, Rose? Definitely not your stateroom. Where are you eating, Rose? Definitely not first class, huh? What you gonna do?
Nikki, you're overthinking it. Just eat your popcorn and enjoy the movie like a good, movie watcher, and you'll enjoy it. No, all I have to say real quick is #Justice for Cal.
Yes.
And that Jack and Rose were never going to make it.
No, they were not. We've talked about this in detail.
Yeah, I can't go into the details of it. But even though I know those things, you better believe that I'm crying when they run and they are embracing. And he's like, you're so stupid, Rose. I'm crying. I can't stop crying.
Do you have a favorite line from Titanic?
Is there anyone out there? When Mr. Fantastic is looking for people? I don't know.
Oh my God. I forgot he was in that movie.
No, this is one of those movies where if you gave me, some paper, I could probably write a good amount of the script. I don't know. I don't have one.
I do.
Yeah, what's yours?
I put the diamond in the coat.
I put the
coat on her. Every time it cracks me up. I can't help it. I'm like, oh, Cal, you're so stupid.
Actually, one I love because it turned into a meme, and I think it's just like so perfectly played all the time is what? Will the lifeboats be seated by class? Oh, mother.
Oh, mother. Come back. Come back.
For someone who says they don't like this movie, you happen to know quite a lot of the lines, Missy.
Listen, it's always a thing you don't like that you know everything about.
I think your nose is growing a couple inches.
I think she doth protest too much. My goodness, I don't know what else we can say about this. I
think we're hey, last but not least, so I think we are in agreement, but do you think that A Night to Remember is a good adaptation?
100%. I think that it's not only is it a good adaptation, I feel like I learned
I did too.
So much more by reading this book. And there is a sequel.
I know. Yeah, there's a sequel. I didn't realize that because I tried not to do too much research like before I read it. So after I read it, I was reading, and he wrote a sequel after it was discovered, after the wreckage was discovered in the 80s. And I completely want to read that.
Oh, yeah, same. Unlike you, I don't think I grew up being a super, Titanic fan, like just like in general of the, I almost said of the ship. I'm not a fan of the ship. I don't think anyone is. But I'd never really dove too deep into like the facts and everything around it. And now that I've started, I think it's going to become a problem for me. Call you up while you're at work. Christina, did you know? And you're like, yeah, of course I did. Click.
Welcome to the cult.
But yeah, I think everyone should probably read the book. It's dry because there's a lot of facts, but I think it's very important that people understand what happened on this ship.
It's an easy read too. It's very I won't say a light read because what it's discussing is just so heavy, but it's a very easy read.
Yeah. Everyone should read it, and then we should all get mad about the Californian together. I'll make a support group.
We both agree that it is something people should read, something people should watch, and A Night to Remember is a good adaptation. Do you think that Titanic is a good adaptation?
The scenes that are taken directly from A Night to Remember, yes. The film overall, I think James Cameron's version of Titanic is too, I want to say it's like too Hollywood to be
Yeah.
a good adaptation. Because, like, really, a lot of the stuff that he puts in there didn't happen. There wasn't just random gunfire and all that mumbo jumbo. But, I mean, if A Night to Remember is too heavy for you, then I would suggest watching Titanic.
See, I think I would agree. It's definitely more Hollywood. Certainly more Hollywood. I think that these three are like those those shitty DVDs at like Walmart, and it's like 5 movies, and there's like maybe one good Nicolas Cage movie,
Yeah.
and then 4 shitty Nicolas Cage movies. So you're like, oh, why not? I'll buy it. Like that. I want to put a good version of that together, and it's someone reading the book, watching A Night to Remember, and then watching Titanic. I think that the three of them all work really well together as a little Titanic sitting.
Well, there's also a TV version of A Night to Remember that came out before the movie did.
Mm-hmm.
That I would love to see because it was narrated and everything was just reenacted on screen.
Yeah.
And I think that should be the 3-pack. I'm sure that one's probably pretty good. Apparently it got a lot of viewership.
See, and maybe in another year or two at the anniversary of the Titanic, perhaps we will venture back to Titanic and look at that one.
We're going to go back to the ship?
You know, the the CD of the score for Titanic, which I owned, did not include all of the songs.
Blasphemy.
So they made a second CD called Back to Titanic, and I owned that as well, and it had a pull-out poster that I put on my wall.
Of course you did.
So you know that now.
Thank you. Thank you for
You're
that.
welcome.
Well, now that we've wrapped up our trip, our journey, we made it. I'm in New York. I'm fine.
We survived.
Now that we're off the boat, it's time to rank it, Christina.
Yeah.
This is exciting. Just as a reminder for everyone, 2021, we are ranking all of the books and movies, and the order, as of right now, is first place, Wizard of Oz. Second place, High Fidelity. Third went to Waiting to Exhale. Fourth is The Birds. Fifth is Ready Player One. And sixth went to the most fictional story I've ever read, Eat, Pray, Love. Really ragging on it. We're, 4 months in, and it still can't shake that feeling. So, Christina, where would you put A Night to Remember on this list?
Oh, it's kind of a rough one, huh?
Yeah.
I want to hear what you say, and because I'm not too sure, to be honest. I feel like it's, I feel like it is below High Fidelity.
Yeah.
I think High Fidelity remains number 2, but I'm not too sure where to place it around Waiting to Exhale or The Birds. That's where I'm getting lost.
Same. I was going to say it's definitely somewhere in the top 4 of the books that we've read. And that's the problem. I still really liked Waiting to Exhale. I feel like if we're basing this off of the same sort of way that we did like High Fidelity, where it's like something that sits with us, I would definitely put it as third, because this is something that I am going to think about every time I see a boat. I'm going to walk the deck and be like, I'm sorry, I need to know where all the lifeboats are.
Right.
I would like to count them,
it's like
please.
haunting. It's a haunting story.
Yeah. It's something that really is there. It just grabs you and holds you for a while. A very strong straitjacket. Grabs you and holds you. But my gut is telling me to make it 4th under Waiting to Exhale, because I still really love that. I still love those women so much.
Yeah.
And because the Californian made me mad. Bitter.
I know, but I'm struggling a little bit with The Birds, because I think that The Birds, both the book and the movie, are just so good.
Yeah.
You know what? let's go with what you said. So, what, number 4 after Waiting to Exhale?
Yeah, so then the new
Okay.
list would be Wizard of Oz, first place. High Fidelity, second. Waiting to Exhale, third. Fourth, A Night to Remember. Fifth, The Birds. Sixth, Ready Player One. And that's it. There's
6
nothing.
out of 7 books, folks.
Yes.
Okay, well, what are we going to be discussing next time? Quite excited.
Oh my goodness. So the next one is my birthday pick.
Woohoo!
So please fully feel free to blame me if this doesn't turn out right. It's okay. I'm going to be old. I can handle it. So in honor of my birthday, we're going to read a book that I've wanted to read because I love the movie. We're reading Who Censored Roger Rabbit, which became Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I love Who Framed Roger Rabbit. I've probably seen that movie more times than I care to admit. That's definitely one of the movies I can quote beginning to end. No.
Yeah, that's fine that we're going from, a favorite of mine to a favorite of yours. That's good, positive energy.
It is. And I feel like this is going to be a good, palate cleanser from how serious. Sure. You wouldn't tell from this podcast, but Titanic was a serious thing. Yeah. I'm excited to see how it's different, how Roger changes. I mean, you've never read the book, right?
No, I've never read the book, and to be honest, the movie I've only seen probably 3 times.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's not one that I grew up with as closely as you, so
I love it so much that I got it on DVD one year for my birthday, and I was like, I don't need to open anything else. This is all I want. And it was the deluxe edition.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll tell you all about it. It's got stuff in it. It's cool. I love it. I really do love it. And it's on Disney Plus.
Yeah.
So if you guys have Disney Plus, check it out. The book might be a little bit harder to find. It's available on Amazon. I think I bought my copy of the book for $10 on Amazon.
Nice. Nice.
Nice. We'll see how that turns out. Who knows? It might not be the real one. Spoiler. But
it's missing 20 pages.
Yeah. You start talking about something, and I'm like, who did what now? No. This is my birthday. We're doing it my way.
That was me with Waiting to Exhale, because I was looking at the audiobook of it, and it was only 3 hours, and then I saw the page number on Goodreads, and I thought, wait a minute. And then I looked back, and it is not listed as excerpts from, but it is excerpts from. So I could have really fucked up that episode by accident, but I had to get the book.
I started talking about her having that heart attack, and you're like, I'm sorry, what?
What happened?
Oh, this was fun. I'm super excited for the next one, and Christina, thank you for joining me on this voyage.
Aw, thank you.
I'm really happy that I kept calling it a ship and not a boat.
I have dogged you about that one, and I have to apologize because throughout me reading, getting back into my Titanic nerdisms, a lot of people exchange the words boat and ship. So you are amongst a large group of people afflicted with this issue.
Thank you. We're all in a support group together. It's fine. We'll figure it out.
Hey, we're all on this boat together.
I'm sorry, it's a ship.
Well, now I think it's our time to sail away off into the sunset.
I'm sailing away. Probably have to pay for that now that I did that. Oh, Christina, I wish you a very fond bon voyage.
Aw, you as well.
Yeah. And thank you again to the person who makes this podcast sound just so good, Jesse.
Thank you, Jesse.
Whoop whoop. He won't go down with the ship. We will. So, these are your captains speaking.